Hey, what's up? Dusk the Viking here. Finally making my video on why I thought VHS failed. I wanted to do a bunch of gameplay clips and stuff, but I realized I was just never going to make this video, so we're just going to talk about it. And let's go ahead and just really get straight to the point. I don't want to meander on and on about it, because I feel like I have a pretty good feel for what went wrong with VHS, and that's that Monster wasn't as fun as Teen. But what does fun mean? Because if you're talking about a party, it's a lot of laughing. If you're talking about a competitive sport, it's a lot of hard work and gritting teeth. But what it really comes down to is like that psychological engagement, the endorphin hits, the emotional highs, all that sort of thing, right? And VHS really lacked that for Monster. If you compare Dead by Daylight to VHS, in VHS, you run around, you land your M1 hits on survivors, and then, you reduce their health bars, right? In Dead by Daylight, you run around M1 survivors, with the option of also maybe using some special ability. But then you would down the survivor, and then you would get to pick them up, drag them to a meat hook, slam them onto the meat hook, they'd scream, and it's a lot of visual satisfaction accompanied with audio satisfaction with an actual payoff in the game because they could potentially die on that hook. And VHS was kind of devoid of that. So this, in Dead by Daylight, you had these sort of like short-term payoffs that gave you a psychological high and an engagement and a sense of accomplishment moving forward. In VHS, you just had 4 health bars that you had to slowly nickel and dime over a very long period of time that could then partially be reset by the Book of the Dead. And then this was compounded by the fact that you would often lose your first 2 stigma pretty easily, making you feel like the whole time you were doing all this, you were also playing on the back foot. And so this made for a very stressful, very unsatisfying sort of gameplay experience. Some people have theorized that it's because Monster was too hard to play and people weren't up for the challenge. But I've played a lot of VHS, Dead by Daylight, Evil Dead, Last Year the Nightmare. Out of all those, I can tell you that Demon and Evil Dead is by far the hardest to play. And there isn't a problem with the demon population with a degree of difficulty. Survivor is a little bit more popular in Evil Dead, but a lot of people agree that Demon is pretty darn fun, and people play it anyway, despite the fact that it is not only super difficult, but that the balance does also slightly favor Survivor. So you've got, balance isn't in a great spot and all that. Whereas in VHS, the balance is absolutely immaculate, right? Like it's some of the best balance I've ever seen in the asymmetrical. And this kind of leads to some of the other mistakes that the developers made. They had this really competitive audience that they built their game for in a genre that typically has a lot of very competitive players, right? But then they didn't provide a ranked mode or a ranked ladder, which was kind of odd. And when they were struggling to get people to play Monster, they tried a 10% experience buff, which didn't make any sense because they were offering a reward for a role that nobody wanted to play, so the reward was meaningless. They could have offered a bajillion experience points to play Monster, and nobody would have played Monster because they weren't interested, right? It wouldn't have pulled any new players in. And then after that, they added emotes to the Monster because they thought maybe Monster would be more fun if you could meme more. But that's like a fundamental misunderstanding of your player base, right? It seemed like they were making changes that would have appealed to people who typically play like Fall Guys or Among Us or some of these goofy casual games. But that's not the demographic of people that they were pulling in. So they were also just making some stuff that didn't make sense. And it's not because they were bad devs. The Hellbent dev team are some of the best devs I've ever seen, man. They genuinely really cared about their community. They worked really hard. I thought they were doing a lot of things right. They seemed to be as consumer friendly as they could with their storefront, with a free-to-play game. Just really good people doing everything they could, and I felt like also trying to do it in the right way. They just misunderstood a few things about their game. And then all that is further compounded by the fact that I feel like they inadvertently built the whole game from the perspective of the survivor, right? Like all the lore is from the perspective of the survivor. The teens all have names, backstories, all the fashion and style. The lobby is the store that they work in. And meanwhile, the monster is also just from the movies that the teens watch. And then if you go to werewolf, and what's the werewolf's lore? It's she's a girl. That's it. That's your lore. And then if you go to the map, all the interactables are for the survivors. The vault points are there to help the survivors. Like all the, places to hide and stuff like that are for the survivors. There's really just nothing from the perspective of the monster. And so then that compounds all the issues that are compounding all the issues. I think if they want to fix the game, they're going to have to give monsters some type of satisfying visual effect to accompany a point in the game where they get an actual payoff. In other words, they need like some kind of ultimate ability that does something cool and flashy and actually accomplishes something in the game. And then they need to rework every map to give like ambush points and places where monsters can set up really cool and fun plays that feel satisfying and exciting. They really feel like they got to do an outplay, because as it stands or stood when I was playing, all four monsters played the exact same way, and that was to juke the corner of a piece of cover while pump faking abilities, right? And like that was all you got to do. It's a very kind of like one pony show as far as engagement goes. So yeah, I think that's kind of what went wrong with VHS, honestly. And they need to do so much. Like, they need to rework Monster by giving them ultimate abilities and rework, like, every map to make them more engaging for the monster. But that's so much work, and, like, the game is pretty far gone at this point. Like, fingers crossed, man. Who knows? Maybe they'll pull something off way down the road. But it just seems like they're not going to have the resources or the time to really pull that off. But I would love to see it, man, because I thought they were really great people and they deserve success. But, it is what it is, right? It just didn't happen. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Just wanted to share my thoughts on it. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video.